Let's be honest. If you were born anytime after the 80s, Nintendo probably helped raise you more than your babysitter. Game Boy under the pillow, blowing into cartridges like it was CPR, and arguing with your cousin about who gets to be Luigi. That was childhood. Nintendo wasn't just a game company, it was the culture. But something changed. Back then, Nintendo felt like that fun uncle who always showed up with new toys. Now, it's starting to feel like a grumpy landlord that charges rent to play with your own memories. Let's rewind. Nintendo basically pioneered the home console era. The NES wasn't just successful, it revived the gaming industry after the 1983 crash. They gave us Mario, Zelda, Metroid, icons that defined generations. They set the gold standard for fun, creativity, and polish. The N64, a cultural reset. The Wii, a phenomenon. The Switch, a comeback story so good it made headlines. But behind all that pixelated joy was a corporate giant slowly tightening its grip. See, while we were busy collecting coins and rescuing princesses, Nintendo was collecting something else. Control. Over its fans, its creators, its culture. And at some point, the Magic Kingdom started feeling more like a monopoly. What if I told you that the same company that made your childhood amazing might be ruining the future of gaming? And hey, if you're into uncovering the dark truths behind the biggest names in gaming, you might want to, not saying you have to, hit that subscribe button. No pressure, just saying. When Nintendo announced the Switch 2, the internet buzzed with cautious optimism. Finally, a long overdue hardware refresh. Finally, something to close the tech gap between Nintendo and its competitors. Finally, power, right? Well, not quite. The specs trickled in, the leaks painted a picture, and the reality hit hard. A $499 console with mobile-grade internals, no real breakthrough tech like DLSS 3 or full ray tracing, and, worst of all, a price tag that didn't match the performance. You weren't buying power, you were buying permission to keep playing nostalgia. And that's when people noticed the other changes, the stuff buried in the fine print. Nintendo's new user agreement for the Switch 2 is basically a corporate leash. It includes clauses that allow the company to remotely disable your console if it detects unauthorized modifications. Translation? Try to fix your Joy-Con drift or customize your hardware, and they can brick your device. It's the gaming version of, we loaned you your own console. Even worse, this authoritarian software control extends to digital games. You don't own them, you license them, and that license? It's now tied even more tightly to your compliance. You violate anything, even accidentally, and poof, access revoked. And that leads to the pricing. Games are now regularly clocking in at $80 to $90 USD, even first-party titles. Add in tax, maybe a collector's edition or DLC, and you're spending the equivalent of a week's rent on a cartoon plumber. And people are doing it, because nostalgia is one hell of a drug. But here's where things get even more dystopian. Third-party developers are getting crushed under Nintendo's family-friendly image and draconian demands. Developers have come out anonymously saying they're being forced to censor content, change art styles, or alter dialogue to pass Nintendo's vague, ever-changing approval system. And if you thought Nintendo's grip stopped at their current titles, think again. Their attitude toward preservation and game history is appalling. They shut down ROM sites, they issue takedowns for fan remakes, and they aggressively target YouTubers and modders, not because they plan to re-release those classic games, no, but because they'd rather let gaming history rot than let fans preserve it outside of their control. It's not just a console anymore, it's a walled garden with a toll at every gate, a garden full of familiar faces, Mario, Link, Samus, trapped in a system where the only way to play is to obey. Nintendo once stood for creativity and wonder. Now, it's starting to look a lot like Apple with extra mushrooms. High prices, tight control, and a cult-like loyalty from fans who just want to feel like kids again. But at what point does loyalty become submission? Let's talk about your childhood for a second. Remember sitting cross-legged in front of a clunky CRT TV, clutching a purple Game Boy Advance, saving Princess Peach, or catching a shiny Charizard at 2 a.m. That was magic. That was joy. That was Nintendo at its best. But in 2025, Nintendo is selling that memory back to you for $70 a pop and calling it innovation. This is the cult of nostalgia, and Nintendo is its high priest. Every few years, Nintendo cracks open the vault and re-releases a slightly polished version of a game you already played. Super Mario RPG Remake, Link's Awakening HD, Metroid Prime Remastered. It's the same game, just shinier, and somehow more expensive than it was 20 years ago. They know you'll buy it. Not because it's new, not because it's groundbreaking, but because it feels like home. Nintendo has weaponized your memories. While Sony and Microsoft push graphical boundaries, expand open worlds, and invest in bleeding-edge storytelling, Nintendo keeps tapping the same nostalgia IV drip, and we keep coming back for another hit. It's not just genius, it's manipulative. And the worst part? It's stifling innovation. Why should Nintendo take risks when slapping Deluxe on an old Wii U game will print cash? Why invest in a new IP when Mario Kart 8, originally released in 2014, is still topping sales charts in 2025? We're not saying these games aren't fun. They are. That's the trap. Nintendo makes great games, some of the best ever made, but the company is stuck in a feedback loop where creativity is strangled by its own legacy. The bar isn't, is it new? It's, does it feel like 1998? And now, the cost of reliving those memories is higher than ever. Remakes and ports hit shelves at full price. Collector's editions are gone in seconds. Amiibos are locked behind scalpers. They're not selling games, they're selling FOMO. It's less about sharing joy and more about scarcity, exclusivity, and emotional manipulation. Nintendo figured out the formula. Don't build the future. Sell the past, over and over again. But here's the thing. Nostalgia has a shelf life. At some point, even the most devoted fans start to see through the curtain. Because once you realize that your childhood joy has been turned into a product line, the magic begins to fade. And in that fading light, maybe, just maybe, it's time to ask, is Nintendo really preserving the past? Or are they holding the future hostage? Nintendo has always worn the mask of innocence. The colorful logo, the joyful chimes, the characters who never age. Mario always smiles, Kirby always floats, Animal Crossing always makes life feel simpler. But behind that mask is a cold, calculated machine. A machine that sues its own fans, shuts down emulation communities, and demonetizes creators for showing love to their IP. They punish loyalty, they stifle innovation, and they do it all while acting like the protectors of fun. Let's talk about that. Nintendo doesn't just discourage fan content, they go to war with it. ROM preservation, fan-made Zelda games, Pokemon mods, gone, struck down. Not because they're losing money, many of these projects make old, dead content accessible, but because Nintendo refuses to let go of control. This isn't protection, it's possession. And their relationship with creators? And while Sony and Microsoft partner with streamers and influencers, Nintendo goes full whack-a-mole with copyright strikes, even forcing people to join a restrictive creator program just to avoid demonetization for showing content they paid for. The company that built its empire on play has become the fun police. Zoom out, and you'll see this behavior is systemic. The inflated pricing, the legal aggression, the subscription traps, the artificial scarcity, the refusal to support crossplay. It's all part of a larger strategy, one where Nintendo doesn't compete, because they built a walled garden of nostalgia, and you're already inside. And to be clear, we're not saying Nintendo is evil. They've made unforgettable games. They created icons that shaped entire generations. But that's what makes their current behavior so painful. Because we want to love them, we want to root for them. But the same company that once revolutionized joy is now squeezing every last pixel of value from that legacy, while silencing the very people who kept it alive. So what now? We're not asking you to burn your Switch. That's not the point. We're asking you to wake up, to see through the illusion, to question the nostalgia. Because Nintendo isn't your childhood friend anymore. It's a billion-dollar corporation, wearing a red cap and a mustache, selling you the past at future prices with a smile. And unless we call it out, they'll keep smiling all the way to the bank. And hey, if you made it this far, you're officially one of the few who see beyond the pixels. Thanks for watching. We built this channel to explore the stories behind the screen, the untold truths, the corporate masks, and the moments that make you question what you thought you knew. If you found something here that made you think, hit that subscribe button. Not for the algorithm, but so you don't miss what's coming next. And yeah, drop a comment. Tell us your take. Did Nintendo go too far? Are we too harsh? Or did we just say what you've been thinking all along? Either way, your voice matters. Liking and subscribing actually helps us more than you might think. It's what keeps this series alive. Thanks again for being part of The Curse of Knowledge, where we don't just play the game. We question who's really holding the controller. See you in the next one.